Hi, Pamela Bellison here. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for coming back. Today I'm going to start teaching you one of the most basic skills every metalsmith needs, sawing. I'm going to show you the ergonomics of sawing so that you can sit properly and save your back and your wrist, and how to saw accurately with precision, how to properly load a saw frame, and give you an assignment at the end. So let's get started. Come on. Sitting properly at your bench when you're sawing metal is very, very important. You want to protect your back, your neck and shoulders, your elbows and your wrists. And knowing how to properly sit, safely sit, ergonomically at your bench is a very important thing. So I'm going to show you the proper seating position, the proper angle for your shoulders, your elbows, and your wrist to be when you're sawing, and a good healthy height to work at your bench pin when you're sawing metal. Take a look at this. Sorry about the glare, if you see glares and lights in my glasses. I'm still getting the hang of this. Anyhow, when you're sitting at your bench and you're going to saw, you want to be at a height about mid-chest for your bench pin compared to the height of your seat. This way, if you're up too high, you're going to be holding your saw frame like this. If it's too low, you're going to be hunched over trying to see what you're doing. And you'll be hunched like, your wrist will be like this. When you're sitting, you want to have a height that you can see, for one, but also is ergonomically healthy for your arm. You want to keep your back straight, if possible, your knees just slightly lower than your hips, and both feet planted flat on the floor. You don't want to have your feet tucked up under you so that your knees are bent at a hard angle. You don't want to be sitting, you definitely don't want to be sawing like this. That's a big no-no. You'll get tired really fast. You also, besides your knees and your hips being down, you also want to keep your shoulders down. A lot of times students get like this. You want to keep your shoulders down and relaxed, your elbows down at your side, and have a 90-degree angle as frequently as possible, as much as possible, while you're sawing. Like this. Keeping this posture keeps your joints as much as possible in a neutral position, and that's the goal. This is commonly referred to as a German saw frame. This is a very traditional one that pretty much most every first-time metalsmith student uses. I love my saw frame. This one's a deeper throat. My first one, the handle's really worn. The black is worn off quite a bit. I wanted to explain a couple of things about the saw frame. There's two wing nuts here. And this one, it might look to you like a coping saw that a lot of people will use in their shop. I don't want to say men, but my husband has a coping saw in his shop, and he says, "Oh, this looks just like mine." One of the things, I don't know if a coping saw has this, but this wing nut can be loosened to adjust this. And I do know some metalsmiths that when they break blades, they keep all their old blades and they actually shorten the distance between here and here where the blade goes, and they use up those little blades, but that's a lot of teeny tiny strokes. How do you know how far to have your blade, or the distance here is when you load your saw frame and you put the top of your blade in, you want your blade to stop right at this point right here. That little piece of metal right here. And you put your blade in there and you tighten this up. Then you want to bring the height of your frame up so that, hopefully you'll be able to see this, so that when you are When you are looking here, if you can see this, you want it about halfway of this darker piece right here. When it's at that point, then you want to make sure you tighten your wing nut. Over time, it is possible to over tighten these, twist too hard. If they break, you can buy small packs of replacement wing nuts. The reason that you need this only about halfway here is that you're going to be pushing on this part so that the bottom of the saw blade, like the top, can be pushed right here to this stop piece here. To right there. So if it's resting here, you're pushing it so that it's there, and that will help give you the right kind of ting, and we're going to talk about that in just a second as well. Loading your saw frame is pretty easy if you just remember a few things. A jeweler's saw blade comes in different sizes, and I'm going to show you a graph or a chart that is inside of a Rio Grande catalog. Rio Grande just recently sent out emails to all of their customers stating that they're no longer going to do print catalogs, but I'm pretty positive that you'll be able to find this same information on their website. All their catalogs are now just going to be online. Once you determine the gauge or the gauge of sheet that you're going to saw and the size of a saw blade that you're going to load into your saw frame, you want to keep a few things in mind. Saw teeth have a direction, and when they're properly loaded into the saw frame, the teeth should be pointing down towards your lap. They should not be pointing up towards your face, but down. The number of teeth in an inch, I believe it is, are what determine the size of a soft blade that you want. And the more teeth they are, the finer the blade is that you're going to be using. Usually a very, very fine blade is for very thin metal, and a more aggressive blade is for heavier gauge metal or for harder metals that you might be working in. What we work with in my studio is non-ferrous metals, and that means that there is no iron in the metal. I'm working with precious metals, primarily silver, but I also work with gold. And I work with copper and brass sometimes. When you load the saw frame, your saw is going to be turned away from you. So this part of the back of your saw frame is going to be at your chest, and this is going to be in the front, away from you, the furthest part away from you. So you want to make sure, again, that the teeth are pointing down and out. I have occasionally accidentally loaded my saw blade backwards where the teeth were facing this way, and I had a smooth surface on there and wondering, why am I not doing this right? Or where I've got mixed up and I've had the teeth pointing up at me. It's only happened occasionally, but it does happen even if you've been doing this for 19 years. So I'm going to show you, if you can see that picture just fine. Now I'm going to show you how to tension that blade when you're loading it. If you're using a saw blade that is so fine that you really can't see the teeth on it very well, if you're trying to determine whether they're facing the right direction, is brace your saw frame up against the side of your bench or at your bench pin, just some surface where you can rest the handle between your breastbone on the sternum and get your blade at the top here where you've pushed it all the way up to the top there, and tighten it where you can't push it any further. If you want to make sure, if you run your finger this way and it's smooth, and you run your finger up this way and you feel the drag running it from the handle up to the top of the frame, if you can feel your finger catching, you have it in the right direction. If not, turn it around until you do. Now you've got your the end of your saw, and I know that this is difficult to see. I'm going to see if I can move this slightly and increase the zoom. Nope, I can't. Okay. You're going to push it, you're going to tension your frame this way by pushing gently on this with your sternum until you get the end of the saw blade to stop. When it stops, hold still, tighten it, and that will tighten your blade in place. You know that you have a properly tensioned saw blade in your frame when you take your fingernail on the back of the saw, on the back of the blade, and you hear a ting. Hopefully you can hear that. If it's too loose, you're going to hear a tong. Don't take your finger on the front where the teeth are. Take your fingernail or your finger on the back of the blade. If it has a tong, a deeper tone, it's a little bit loose and you want to tighten that up just a little bit more until you hear the ting. Ting, ting. That is a properly tensioned saw. One of the things I see students frequently do is get what I call a death grip on their saw. Holding the saw properly is very important. These blades are very fine. It doesn't take a whole lot to break them. If you are pushing and trying to make your brute force cut through the metal quickly, you're going to break your blade. And a lot of that force comes when people have what I call a death grip, or they white knuckle the handle of the saw frame. You don't have to do that. You can hold, release the grip, and just hold it gently so that it freely moves in your hand. I do a lot of this with my fingers wrapped all the way around, and I do a lot of my turning like this with these two fingers, and I do a lot of swiveling with them like this, and then I also use my wrist. I do a lot of it all together, and then I also turn the metal. But having a death grip and having your thumb here so that you're trying to push through is not the way to be sawing. That tension that you're holding in your hand is going to travel all the way up your arm, all the way up your shoulder, and into your neck and your upper back. And that's going to be exhausting. When you're determining the height of your chair or your bench pin, and you saw in the catalog that there is something that can help adjust the height of your bench pin, you can also do simple things like having pieces of wood, 2x4 or something like that. That's really cheap. You might have some scrap handy, or you can pick some up at a big box store and say, do you have any scraps of 2x4 or thinner wood, until you get a good height that you want to be sitting at to saw. One of the important things is not only can you see it, and I've talked about the OptiVisor and the importance of being able to see, whoa, using an OptiVisor or one similar that you can get at places like Harbor Freight, or I'm sure that you can get them at the big box stores. You can get them at craft stores like Joann's or Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whatever. You want to make sure that you have a good visual distance of 10 to 12 inches from your what you're working on. But the important thing is to be able to keep your wrist neutral. Neutral is straight down, and keep your shoulders down and your elbows straight down, so that when you're sawing, you're going in this motion and you're not too high or too low. You want to just be able to tilt your neck down slightly, but not have to go like this. You don't want to be like this. You just want to be able to see your work at a height where you're only tilting your head down a little bit and you're just looking down through whatever visual aids, if you need any visual aids. I need some visual aids myself, thank you. I'm weird.